Welcome to Monday morning, the 4th of May. We're going to start with the unit overview for Theatrical Traditions and Performance Style, which is a fabulous unit. And we're going to be focusing on one particular performance style and the traditions surrounding that. And here we go. Kicking off with the course prescription. I have bolded a few important sections. This is straight from the NESA syllabus. Can you please pause now and read through the syllabus? I've also attached another copy on Edmodo if you prefer read it off there. Okay, so pause now, have a read, and then we'll come back. Okay, so which particular style will we be exploring for these traditions and performance styles? We're going to be looking at restoration comedy, which leads into or is predominantly about the comedy of manners. Okay, so just a few sort of hints and clues as to what that might lead us into over here. So as you notice from the prescription, this is all about context. Okay, we've got to know about the times, the ideals, the attitudes, the values of the particular context in which this theatre was not only created but performed, and how audiences of that time received it as well. So when was Restoration comedy a dominant style? So it emerged in the late 17th century England, and it was heavily influenced by French neoclassicism. Now, the King Charles at the time, had been exiled to France and had come back with all these fabulous ideas and a huge appreciation for the arts. So when he came back to take the throne, it was at a time when England was coming out of a long period of austerity and Puritanism, when theatre and many other seemingly indulgent practices and events of the time were banned. So it was, I think technically it wouldn't have mattered what they'd put on the stages at that time. To be reinvigorated with the arts would have just been during this time of intense austerity and only focusing on religion, no outlets, no entertainment. It would have been fabulous. So hence why it was very well received. And I think when we start to understand the ostentatious nature of this particular style, it makes sense because everyone had been deprived for so long. Okay, so problems for us. How are we going to learn experientially when we are online? So yes, this is going to be problematic. We're obviously going to be very limited with the practical workshops, so hopefully when we do have face-to-face time, we can devote it to some impro and practical tasks. However, an invaluable way to understand a particular performance style and theatrical context is actually reading plays of the time and providing directorial vision on what these scenes would look and sound like, both from the perspective of acting and design elements. So you need to put your director pants on and think, okay, now that I've got, or when we do have all the context and understanding, and we can look at movement, voice, staging, design, all of those elements. When we've got that background, you then need to think, okay, well, if I were a director of that time, or now putting on a restoration play as a little homage, how would I stage it? What would my costumes look like? What sort of characterization would I want my actors to be portraying and adopting? So, plays, an excerpt from these plays, and providing directorial vision. Another fabulous resource we can use is absorbing. Well, we can absorb, I suppose, but we can observe and analyse how the gurus in film and live theatre recordings do it. So rather than, when we're looking at these examples, rather than analysing it like a film, so sort of looking at the cinematography, we will focus primarily on the characterisation and set and costume. So it's sort of pulling it apart and thinking even if it is film, how it would be sort of adapted and reimagined onto the stage. So this particular style of restoration comedy is so accessible, and we will be able to see its influence on contemporary comedy as well. And look, if everyone's on board, potentially we can do some Zoom sessions. We'll see how we go. Okay, moving on. All right, so assessment. Obviously, there will be no formal assessment this term. So what would it have been? It would have been a group performance essay. Okay, so not necessarily a performance, but a performance essay, which is a little bit like didactic theatre. Its intention is to teach. So you would have been informing an audience about restoration theatre and comedy in an entertaining manner. So you would have been informing us about plot structures and subject matter and themes of restoration plays, the sort of character types involved with this theatrical tradition and performance style, and then the acting techniques adopted by the actors of that time, or if we're putting it on in contemporary times, conventions involved with this theatrical period and theatrical context. Was there a certain sort of routine that audiences could expect to see, various tropes, various motifs, sort of similar plot lines. So basically sort of patterns that they would always see and be exposed to during this time. Kind of like rules. Think of conventions almost like rules of that particular style. Okay, performance spaces of that time. Obviously, they wouldn't have had the high-tech lighting, or they wouldn't have even had electricity back then. So, how did they highlight certain features of the plays? How would the audience be positioned to view music? Delivery of lines. How is the sound reaching the entire audience, etc., for these particular performance spaces of the time? And in that group performance essay, you would have been using excerpts from various restoration comedy plays to bring these to life, to show our contemporary audience what the authentic plays would have been like at the time. Okay, so no formal assessment task. However, term 3 will continue to explore restoration comedy in our next unit of study, which is elements of production. Okay, so everything you learn this term in regards to this information here is going to lead us into next term as well. And obviously the theory will be assessed in the yearly examination. So you will be doing 2 extended responses. One on improvisation and play building from last term, and another on restoration comedy. So nothing we do this term is in vain. Okay, so your task for today is looking at your initial impressions. So we will get into some extensive reading and theory next lesson, but to kick off our endeavour into restoration comedy, let's start with gathering some background knowledge, or perhaps lack thereof, which is absolutely fine if you know nothing, and become aware of our associations with and initial reactions to some images of restoration comedy. So I want you to observe the following images and complete a see, think, wonder. So approach the images collectively, so you're not doing a see, think, wonder on each picture. Look at all of them and then come back and do your see, think, wonder. So look for motifs, patterns, similarities in your see. What sort of commonalities do you see emerging in all of the images? Please list anything you recognise or any familiarities, connections, assumptions that you're starting to make, subject matter and themes that could possibly be in focus. Put that under your list of what you think, and any queries or questions under your wonder. Provide your observations in a separate Word document titled See, Think, Wonder, Restoration Comedy. So, for example, I've just got a few things that you could focus on. So, I see men and women with extreme makeup. I see corsets, wigs, buckled heels, expressions of shock and outrage, flamboyant costumes, specifically contextual set dressing and costuming, suggestive and risque situations. So from all of these things that I see, I think that courtship is evident. I think sexual innuendo is a common feature of these plays. I think there were some servants and lords masters, which suggests that class could be a thematic concern. I think some characters are higher status than others. I think physicality has a dominant presence, etc. So, questions and queries. I wonder who the key playwrights of this context were. I wonder how audiences received these plays. I wonder why men wore heels and overt makeup like the female characters. And I wonder how this style has influenced contemporary comedy. So once you have completed your Word doc, can you please submit that in the assignment box? Okay, forward to reading your responses. Ta-ta!